Well, thank you everyone for having me. Thank you, Jeff and Marcio, for putting this together. We've done a couple of these so far with our company, and we really enjoy doing these. And thank you to everybody in the design build community for coming out and spending some time. As Jeff said, I am Director of Sales and Business Development for LK and Associates. We're a manufacturer's rep firm covering the state of Florida. We represent multiple brands of high-end technology products, many of which are probably in the projects that you complete with your customers. And we work with the team at Boca Theater on training and selling and implementing these systems. I am a CEDIA outreach instructor. So CEDIA, as Jeff said, is our trade organization. And one of the benefits of CEDIA, in addition to what we provide our members, is we provide training to the design build community in various trades. So today we're going to talk about lighting control Illuminated. We are an AI provider, and you will be earning credits for this class. So because this is virtually, it's done a little bit different. Normally we would have you fill out an evaluation and sign up sheet if we did this in person, but because it's virtual, after this call, those that attended and sat through will receive an email with 2 links, and you'll be given some of the information you need to fill out, but simply fill out the evaluation form. That allows us to get feedback on how you receive the course, the registration link. And from there, we will follow up and issue you your certificates for participation. So, lighting control has been around for a number of years. I think probably the first version of lighting control was the dimmer switch, because it literally gave us the ability to control the lighting in the space. But it's evolved over time with technology, and it's really become a standard in both new construction and retrofit solutions. There is a lot of confusion around what lighting control can do, how you can sell it. A lot of people think there's misconceptions that it's expensive. So today we're going to talk through kind of the basics of lighting control so that you can kind of understand how it can work with your projects, from a new construction project or a large scale residence to a simple condo, small project. We have products and solutions for any type of project that you're working on. And there's a lot of advantages to lighting control a lot of people don't realize. Typically, lighting control gets presented because it's a large house, and people, are putting it in because they don't want to walk around the house to turn all the lights off. But it's much more than that. So we're going to dive into those details today. But before I get started, I think kind of an underlying theme with these courses that we really want to present to the design build community is that we want to help meet and exceed the expectations of your clients' projects, just like you do with the part that you're involved in. And the only way we can do that is if we're involved early. So as we go through this course, and if you've been a part of any of the other sessions, you'll see that we have some really great products and solutions, but unfortunately our trade gets brought in very late into the project, and it makes it hard to implement these solutions when certain parts of the project have already been completed, such as framing or drywall. So if you were to take anything away from this class, hopefully you will learn a few things about lighting control, is that bring us into these projects as early as possible. The team at Boca Theater really would like to be involved even in the planning stages, because we can really help implement what the client's vision is. So this is also a registered class with IDCEC, so whether you're an architect or designer, we'll have credits available for the class. So today, we're going to focus on terminology of lighting control. So we're going to talk about some terms that we use on our side, some of which you're probably familiar with, but we're going to kind of dive into those a little bit. We're going to talk about the difference between the different types that are out there, centralized, retrofit. There's many types of lighting control scenarios that are out there. We're going to talk about different lamp types and talk about new opportunities with LED lighting. And we're going to talk about the benefits of lighting control, not just using it for a house that's 20,000 square feet, but why else would you want lighting control? And there's many advantages to architects as well as designers. We're going to talk about some of the misconceptions related to lighting control. People think it's very expensive or complicated or can get outdated very quickly, so we'll talk about that. And then in the end, we'll talk about some design considerations when you're starting to lay out the plans. So lighting control terminology. I think everybody on this call is probably familiar with a lighting load. That's basically a single light or a group of lights that are physically connected and they turn on and off together. It's important to understand that because when we get involved in the project, for us to accurately quote it, we need to know how many loads we're controlling. A lot of times we'll request a load schedule. Sometimes we just get plans and we have to count it up ourselves. But essentially, the core of our design, whether it is a centralized or retrofit, is we need to know the load schedule. How many loads are we controlling? And understand that it's not always an all or nothing. Sometimes clients think they want to control every single load in the house because it's always nice to have that all off or good night button, which shuts down the entire house. But depending on budget, we can control portions of the house that make more sense. So there's a lot of flexibility, but the core of it is understanding what the loads are and how they're connected, and the ratings, which we'll talk about later. A lighting module relates to something that we put in. And so it's basically a device that physically connects between the switch and the load and allows us to control and dim a load or multiple loads. So that is the lighting module. We have a small picture, a sample of one from one of the brands that's out there. Another terminology that we use the term scenes in everything we do with automation, but a lighting scene is where we can take multiple loads at the same time and bring them all to their exact dimming levels on or off at the touch of a button. And so this is one of the really big benefits to lighting control. So you see here we have a sample of an automation system, and certainly new automation systems look much more different with the interface, but having a welcome button that turns on specific lights at certain levels, or a goodbye, an away, or party. This allows the client to really set the mood within the house, and we do that through what's called a lighting scene. So a few more terms that we need to understand: a wall box dimmer. So that's just the standard, in-wall line voltage control switch. So the traditional wiring in a house uses line voltage. There's a switch on the wall or multiple switches. Those tie directly to the panel and directly to the load. And a wall box dimmer is simply a inline, in-wall voltage controllable dimmer, which is controlling the switch on and off. And then lastly, we have keypads. So one of the big benefits to our systems is being able to have a keypad that can control multiple loads or scenes from one location. And so typically this is either a low voltage or line voltage control point. And we'll talk more about what those two mean a little bit later, which is programmable. It's capable of controlling multiple loads or controlling other control devices, so music or other things that are in the automation system. So this is an example of a keypad. There's many different versions depending on the type of brand you look at, but you can see some of the advantages you have there with the keypad. So fixture type. So again, when we're working together on a project and we're talking about, well, what kind of loads are there? Or how many loads. We're also going to talk. A
participant has joined the meeting.
So we have LED, we have fluorescent, we have halogen. There's multiple types, but that's important because depending on what we're using to control it, we need to know the type of fixture that's being controlled. Occupancy sensors. So this is another part of the lighting control system that we use for a variety of reasons. So there could be rooms in a space that maybe it's not necessary to have a switch on a wall, like closets, maybe even small bathrooms. So the occupancy sensor allows you to sense motion in the space and turn the room on or off based on that motion. So again, think of closets. You walk in, the light turns on, you leave, it notices there's no more motion, it turns it off. Those can be used for other things as well, but we use those a lot in lighting control. And lastly, and this is something that's a little bit newer to technology that we'll talk more about later, which is human-centric lighting. And so this is a type of lighting that can actually benefit the biological and emotional health and well-being of people. And I think, all of us being at home more right now, not being in the office, we can see the effects of light. Natural light tends to have a better effect. A lot of times when we're in the office under fluorescent lights, that can have a negative effect. So we'll dive deeper into what human-centric lighting systems are. So now that we've gone through some of the terms, it's important to understand the two major types of lighting control systems. And this is where it gets important to understand, especially from the design standpoint. There's one that's called specialty wired, or what I like to call also is centralized lighting systems. And this is where the conventional wiring of a house is done differently. So conventional wiring, power comes into the panel, and from the panel, it gets circuited and goes out to the different loads in the house. And in line is obviously a switch or an outlet. Well, with specialty wire, we insert a lighting module, which we talked about earlier, and that lighting module goes between the load and between the electrical panel, and there's no switch in that line voltage. And so now this lighting module is actually controlling the load, and that could be an on-off, that could be a dim, and there's a variety of different lighting modules, but we call it centralized lighting because all these modules they sit in a centralized area. So there's usually like an equipment room or a mechanical room. They go in the wall, and those are the modules that control that house. The other type of control system is called a conventional wired, or what I like to call retrofit. And this is where you have standard wiring in a house. You have a switch or multiple switches on a wall, and basically we pull those switches out, we insert, for lack of a better term, a smart switch, and then now we're able to control those loads through an app, through an automation system. So typically specialty wire would go into new construction, conventional would go into retrofit, but there's other cases where conventional really isn't meant for large scale houses. 20, 30,000 square foot houses really should not do the conventional size because we can run into some issues with the limits of the system. And we'll talk more about that later. But main difference is specialty and conventional. So types of lighting control systems, diving in a little bit deeper. On the specialty wired, some of the features, again, it's really good for new construction because we can change how things are wired. Again, pointing out the fact that we need to be brought in early. If electrical plans have already been laid out and they're actually pulling Romex through the space, we're gonna have to make changes to that because of the specialty wired system. So that's a really good example of why we should be involved early. And understand that the team at Boca Theater, when brought in early, if they're specifying a specialty wired system, they're going to do those drawings and plans for you. I know that that sometimes can be a problem because you, the architect or designer, is relying on the electrician. This is something that they'll be involved in and help with those plans. With this type of system, the keypads get installed in place of switches. There's different requirements there, though, because these keypads tend to have writing on them. We tend to put them at different heights. So that's, again, something that we have to pay attention to. With the specialty wired, we can control a larger variety of fixture load types and wattage sizes. So again, if you have a very large house, maybe there's large chandeliers or other types of really specialty fixtures that are high loads, this system is going to be better geared towards that. But at the same size, we can also handle small projects. So this type of system scales really well. Typically, people wouldn't think of it as something you'd put into a condo project, but because it's centralized, you can actually decrease the space required for these products. So it works in all different areas. So talking a little further on the specialty wired, some design consideration, things that you want to think about. This does require a company that is certified to install these products, which should be the case with a lot of the technology systems that are out there. But this one in particular does require a higher level of certification. And regardless of the brand, we're not really getting into brands here, but there are multiple brands that deliver these types of specialty wired systems. I mentioned this earlier, but the keypad heights and locations, these tend to be different than normal switches. It's hard to tell by this picture, but that keypad actually has writing on that. So if that's installed in a standard switch height, you're going to have to bend over to read it. So we do tend to position these higher. Again, another reason we should all be working together early, especially from a design standpoint, knowing that those keypads are going to be higher than normal is really critical to understand. And a lot of times we have to make those changes after the fact, and it causes a lot of problem on projects. We have to allocate space for the equipment. So from left to right, you see a keypad, but then you see a processor. That processor has to go at a head end somewhere like an equipment room or AV closet. And then you see the actual lighting modules, which also have to go in a specific area. Now there's ways we can separate this. They are flexible to split up. So we can put some of these in a garage, some of them inside of the house. But again, it requires that we get involved very early on to help with that planning because it does require specific wiring. When we get into conventional wired, these are using standard electrical installation. So let's say you're on a project, your client wants lighting control and automation, electrical's already been pulled, it's already done, it's already been permitted. We do have a solution, but we're going to be held to the conventionally wired systems. They also work in new construction as well, but like I said, it works a lot on retrofit. So late construction projects, post-electrical, this solution is what's going to apply. There's very little centralized equipment. This is more of a decentralized system. There's a processor that manages all the communications, but a lot of the technology is built into the switches itself. And you're seeing one version of a type of switch that can be used. There's multiple types of products that we can use, from a standard Decora opening to something you see here. So when we look at some of the options and pros and cons, so with a conventionally wired system, centralized provides more complex programming solutions. Centralized facilitates integration with other systems. Decentralized, much better suited and more economical on smaller projects. So the conventionally wired or decentralized systems do tend to be a little bit less expensive. So if budget is a factor, that is another way to go about it. Wired versus wireless. So with everything we do, even with the technology behind wireless, we always want to choose wired if we have that option, or low voltage, some sort of connection. But there are options where we can use technologies like Zigbee, Z-Wave, or some sort of wireless protocol. Those are really secondary, or options you choose if you have no other option, because again, there are still issues with that type of connectivity. And there's some also, it's a little bit older technology, but power line carrier, X10, that's not used as much, but that is another type of technology in terms of communication. So design considerations. If we're limited on the load, size, or type, that's something we need to understand. Again, typically on very large houses, there's giant chandeliers or specialty fixtures, and it's important we understand what that load size is, because that might dictate what type of system we have to use. The variety or functionality and price, and typically with the conventionally wired, the lifespan of the system isn't as long. So these are just some things that you want to consider when you're looking at the different systems. And again, this isn't necessarily something that you should be worrying about. This is where you reach out to the team at Boca Theater, and through the design phase, they're going to go through this stuff with you when we're qualifying what works and what's best for the customer. So talking about light bulbs, so everybody's familiar with the incandescent bulb. I think there's very limited on what you can purchase in the incandescent world these days. They're very inefficient. They're not environmentally friendly. Their lifespan is very limited. However, they do dim well. Their cost is pretty inexpensive. Their beam control and spread is really good. LED has really been one of the fastest adopted technologies in lighting that we've ever seen. They're very efficient. They're environmentally friendly. Their lifespan is much longer. You have good beam control, just like a standard incandescent bulb. Dimming, I don't know if I'd say 4 stars. We do have issues with LEDs. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And their cost is a little bit higher, but of course you have energy savings over time. So a couple of differences with LED bulbs. And so we have various types of bulbs with different colors. And so most people are familiar with the standard white single element color LED bulb. And most people are familiar with different Kelvin temperatures. A lot of times people choose a 2700 or a 3000. But there's also what we call warm white. And that's a white LED bulb that has some yellow elements, and it dims. It's called warm to dim or warm glow dimming. There's different terminologies between different companies. But basically, that warm white bulb is trying to simulate a standard incandescent. So when it dims, it gets warmer, and it looks like a natural dimming bulb. Moving upon that, we have newer technologies like RGB, which gives us different color shifting. And then we also have RGB white, which gives us all different color shifting, but also we can do something called human-centric lighting, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Be concerned, be aware that with LED, there is dimming challenges. So there are no standards amongst manufacturers, which is really tough for us, because a lot of times we're told to control the lighting. And if we don't know what types of bulbs are being used, it's very possible that even our best control system will not dim the lights properly. So again, another reason to bring us involved as early as possible. A lot of the manufacturers that we work with have tested the majority of the bulbs out there or fixtures. And so if you tell us this is the type of bulb we're using, we can look at the specs and vet it with our manufacturers to make sure it's going to dim properly. There's nothing worse than finishing a system and dimming the light, and if it gets below 20% and it starts to flicker. And that's because of the bulb, not the control system. And it has to do with there's really no standards between the manufacturers. Rule of thumb: the cheaper the LED, probably the worst performance it's going to have. So why would your client look at putting in a lighting control system? Well, there's multitude of factors. Aesthetics is a big one that a lot of people don't think about. You know, if you walk into a house or a room and you see 6 to 8 switches on a wall, from a design perspective, it doesn't look very attractive. And so with a lighting control system, purely from an aesthetic standpoint, we can take those 6 to 8 loads and drop it down into a single gang outlet or 2 gang outlet. There's other aesthetic benefits as well, as some of the keypads we have look much more elegant than your standard light switch options. So aesthetics is a big one. Convenience is another factor. You know, being able to hit one button on a scene and set your lights to the right moment, whether that's on or off, or possibly a lighting path. You know, those are all another good reason to install a lighting control system. Safety and security is something that people don't think about. So, you know, imagine getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom or to go to the kitchen and being able to hit a button and light a path to that area you want to go at a very dim level. That's a nice safety feature, right? Because it keeps you from tripping or falling all over. But also from a security standpoint, what if you could hit a button that turns on every single light inside and outside the house? You know, you hear a noise, you think somebody's on your property, you can turn all those lights on at the touch of a button. Furthermore, a lot of times we have these things tied into security systems. So if the alarm system's tripped, lights on the outside start to flicker and flash. And if you have things like WRGB technology, you could even have lights change colors, right? You could actually mimic police lights at your house triggered by a security system. So those are things a lot of people don't think about. Energy savings is another aspect of it. There's two ways to look at this. Obviously, using LED lights can save you energy, but if you're not leaving lights on, or the other thing that people don't realize is a lot of times when we design systems, we don't set the lights to go full brightness. Maybe they only ever go to 90% or 80%. Most people would not be able to tell the difference between 100% or 80%, but that drop, that 10 to 20% drop, will dramatically save energy, lifespan of the bulb, and money over time. And so that's another big aspect of it. And then lastly is flexibility. What's really great with these systems is after living there for a year or two, if you want to make changes, it's very easy to reprogram and make these types of changes to the system. So looking at aesthetics more, I think most of us on here would agree that that's a very good looking wall keypad. And so one thing is we're controlling 4 loads. So if this was a traditional wired system, we would have 4 switches or dimmers on the wall here, which would really add a lot of clutter. So by using a specialty wired system, we've now taken 4 switches down to 1, and we put in a very elegant keypad that sets the tone for the room. It fits in with the design elements. So those aesthetics come in multiple ways, right? We were able to decrease the wall clutter, but also use something very elegant that looks very nice on the wall. And that keypad's one example. We can get those in multiple finishes. We've seen them in glass. We've seen them in areas where we can actually flush them into the wall. So this is just one example. There are many other examples of how we can blend these things in with the aesthetics of the design. So another benefit, you know, talking about consistency, convenience, easy to use, is the lighting scenes. And again, these are scenes that most people think about, but this could be expanded upon as creative as you want to be. You know, having that home scene that you touch a button and certain things light up in the house as you walk in, or a welcome scene, or an away scene. You're leaving the house. Oh, I forgot to turn the light off in the bathroom. Well, that away scene is going to take care of that. Maybe an evening out scene that doesn't turn all the lights off, leaves a few on so it still looks like you're home. A good morning scene, and the good morning scene can tie into human-centric lighting, where certain lights turn on at certain Kelvin temperatures to wake you up, same as a good night scene. And the vacation mode is interesting. Most people don't think about, but one year I was going away for like a week and a half on vacation, and I created a vacation mode scene on my system so that different lights turned on at different times of day, 24 hours a day. So people didn't really know we were gone. And so that's another creative way of using these scenes. Again, the options are endless, and it makes it very, very flexible. So we've mentioned a few times human-centric lighting. So this is kind of a new term that's been thrown out there. The other one you'll hear is circadian rhythm technology. Again, different companies are using different terminology, but it all kinds of means the same thing. And basically, with this type of lighting, we can balance the visual, emotional, and biological benefits of how lighting affects humans. There's been lots of studies done that how lighting affects you. Most of us probably have smartphones, and they all have some sort of way to turn off the blue lights at night, right? Because the blue light in the LED of the phone is known to depress the melatonin production within our body, which then keeps us awake. Other lights will increase melatonin production, which makes us sleepy. And so that's kind of the core benefit of human-centric lighting. We can adjust the type of Kelvin temperature at different parts of the day, that how it'll affect us. It can make us more productive, it can help wake us up, and it can make us a little more drowsy at night so we can sleep better. And this was a very big area prior to COVID-19, but I think this is a product in the what we call the wellness category. We also have things like special types of filtration systems for our air conditioning that ties into this whole new category that I think a lot of customers are going to be interested in as we come out of this. Human-centric lighting, it promotes good vision, it satisfies the emotional needs of humans. Again, if you've ever worked in a poor lighting environment, you've probably recognized that it affects how productive or not productive you are. So it's a big deal. It helps stimulate us on so many different levels. There's a lot of LED technologies that allow us to basically emulate the cycles of the sun and sync with our internal circadian rhythm time clock. And that's really what we're trying to do here. And some of this is at the bulb level, some of it's at the fixture level, some of it is an entire system that is designed to run it. So there's a lot of different ways that you can put this into a project. And this is all done automatically. So some of what I'm talking about might sound daunting because their customer's not going to get up and adjust the Kelvin temperature of their house, right? Well, our goal is we have solutions that do this automatically. So if the client's interested in the technology, we specify a system where they don't even have to do anything. This just, their house just naturally runs in this type of operation. So this gives you a better shot of what we're talking about. You know, we need light, we need darkness. That's what allows us to get up and function and go to sleep at night. And so there's certain times of the day when it affects us differently. So typically, you know, in the morning, we don't have the Kelvin temperatures listed here, but that is a very low Kelvin temperature at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so imagine your lights in your bedroom turning on at that dim level, and it's almost like the sunrise is waking you up, but inside your home. And then we start to wake up, and around, you know, from the late morning till afternoon is when we really have our most alert and best capacity to work. And if we're working under poor lighting, it's going to diminish that. And so having light that can stimulate you. And then again, shifting throughout the day, winding down into the evening. Again, we're just mimicking what the natural sun does outside, and we can bring that into the house. So talking more about safety and security, so I touched on this earlier. Motion sensors is something we use quite frequently, and again, that can turn lights on. So again, somebody gets up in the middle of the night, we can use a motion sensor to kick on that light to help us see where we're going. You can have an all on or panic button. Again, that button is programmed. That could be a hard button on the wall, that could be a button through the app, and that literally turns on every light within the house. We can use this to illuminate pathways and exits. So again, people coming over for entertainment, we can use this to light the ways to their cars. Lots of different options here. And again, from an emergency perspective, we can we can create this trigger from the security system where lights inside and outside flash to show that something's going on in the house. In the end, we can have whatever the right light is at the right time. So all of us sitting on this call are seeing this going, wow, this is great, but we all may want to use this differently. And that's the great benefit of a lighting control system, because we can choose whatever the right light is for the customer at that right moment. It's going to be different for everybody. So from an energy perspective, sustainability is another hot topic with people. They want to feel like they're contributing to the environment. And again, this is going to save energy because we're not wasting energy turning lights on, or we're not running them to their full capacity. That does equate to saving money. It decreases the amount of bulbs you're going to consume because you're not taxing on them. And in the end, you're going to be reducing your carbon emissions because you're using less light and controlling the systems. And again, I mentioned this earlier, like traditional toggle switches, it's full on 100% or full on off. And again, with lighting control systems, we set limits because people really don't notice the differences. And that really has the biggest effect on energy consumption right there. So we talked about flexibility. And again, because it's a control system, we can program these things however we want. It's very easy to add or remove buttons or increase functionality of the system, adjust to the changing needs. So I'm sure the team at Boca Theater has a way they deploy lighting systems on every project. So regardless if it's a big house or a small house or what your client's looking for, a really good integrator like Boca Theater is going to have a way they deploy it that's very consistent. And, but understand it's very flexible. So after the client lives in the house for a week or 30 days or maybe 90 days, depending on if it's a permanent home or vacation home, it's very easy to go back and make these changes. And that's a really big benefit. And that's for either of the two systems we talked about. Both systems are very flexible in this manner. So a lot of misconceptions that are out there. Lighting control systems are complicated to use. Yes, it is a type of technology. They've gotten simpler. A lot of the apps to control them are done via the phone, and most of us know how to use the phone. The other thing too is it goes back to how a company like Boca Theater deploys these systems. So for example, if you have lighting control in every room, it may be common practice for the top button to be turning the room on and the bottom button to be turning the room off, and other buttons to control scenes. If that's what the design is, that should be replicated in every space. So every room you walk into, you know the top button's on, you know the bottom button's off. Now there could be a different design aspect of that. I'm not a lighting designer, but the concept there is a good lighting control integrator like Boca Theater is consistent with what they do in every room. So it is simple to use. You walk in there, you look at the keypad, you know exactly what it is you have to do. So can they be complicated? Depends who you're partnering with. But by far and large, if you're working with a great company, they should not be complicated. They should be very simple to use. And that comes down to how these systems are designed from a programming perspective. Technology changes fast. My system will be obsolete in a month. True, technology does change fast, but this is not like the iPhones of the world or the computers that are getting outdated every 2 to 3 years. We have lighting control systems that were deployed 20 years ago that are still functioning today. The core behind them, which goes back to how the houses are wired and the electrical plans, that is not changing. So the technology of what the lighting control system can do does change. Usually there's new features, but the core of what it does will not come obsolete very quickly. And that's because of electrical standards. Nothing like that has changed. And again, we have systems that have been out there for decades. And lastly, lighting control systems are expensive. The specialty wired systems tend to be required to have a bigger budget, but they don't have to be. It all comes down to how we design it. And some of the traditionally wired systems or retrofit systems have actually come down in price. You do want to stay away from the Internet of Things, do it yourself off the shelf type stuff. You still want to stick with something that needs to get installed and integrated, by a company like Boca Theater and an electrician. But by and far and large, the cost of these systems has come down dramatically and are very inexpensive. So design considerations, and we're coming into the end, and we can do some Q&A. we want to find out what are the important benefits the client's looking for. So sometimes it's, I just don't want a lot of keypads on the wall. Sometimes it's, I just want to be able to shut every light off at the push of a button. But understanding what benefits make the most sense is the big determining factor. Then that allows us to kind of go through the funnel of how we can create the right system for them. Having a budget, right? With everything we do, from the design community to the build community, every one of us always works off of budgets. We have to work off a budget as well. But understanding some sort of budget for the system is important. When it comes to designing it, best thing we can get is a fixture schedule and a lighting plan. We can turn around a design and a quote pretty quickly if you're trying to establish a budget, right? Maybe the client has no idea how much a lighting control system costs. If we have a fixture schedule and a lighting plan, we can turn around a quote, so at least you have a budget discovery pretty quickly. We need to make sure we have space for enclosures, right? If we're doing a specialty wired system, we got to have space in a wall, maybe a dedicated closet somewhere. And then we have to be in the right phase of the project. If electrical has been pulled, it's going to be very hard for us to deploy a specialty wired system. And based on the needs of the client, that might be what makes sense. So again, bringing us in early is always really important. Keypad locations, again, being involved early where we can help dictate keypad locations. We have to have different wiring. If we're doing a specialty wired system, those keypads operate off of a low voltage cable. So we have to wire for it, but then also the location from a height perspective is important. If there's motorized shades or shutters or hurricane type protection systems, because again, we can use the lighting control system to control that. And I think that's important to note. If you're working with a builder who's building spec homes, I certainly understand that they don't want to put in full-blown control systems with music and video because they want the client to add that. But certainly lighting can be a core part of that feature because that can tie into a bigger system. Well, motorized shades and shutters can also be a part of that. And so it's important to understand if we're going to be controlling those things because we can do that through this type of system. Also understanding if there's a generator on site or alternate power source, maybe we need to have some emergency backup lighting. So we have to have certain loads that are part of that special panel. And then also water features, entry, exit gates, landscape lighting. Again, a lot of these things can also be triggered and controlled through the lighting control system. So it's part of the main design of the house. So recapping what we went through, we talked about lighting control terminology, and we talked about the difference between the types of lighting systems, specialty wired, conventional, or what I like to say is centralized or retrofit. We talked about some of the different lamp types. We talked about the benefits of lighting control, which hopefully you can see it's more than just reducing wall clutter or having the ability to turn everything on or off. It goes so far beyond that. We talked about some of the misperceptions related to control systems, and we talked about some design considerations. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff to see if we had some questions or want to unmute to take some questions.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much, Jason. I am unmuting everyone right now, so please feel free to use the chat box or to just talk live. A couple of notes that I took during the conference here that I would put out just to spur the conversation. Boy, we have a lot of background noise now. If you have background noise, feel free to mute and unmute yourselves. With the specialty wiring, when you do multi-way switches, like 3-way, 4-way, at the top of the stairs, bottom of the stairs, that kind of stuff is difficult, more difficult than specialty wiring because you have to think about that in advance. It's very nice. Okay, hang on. I guess I'm going to have to hit some mutes here. Just mute when you've got something to say or unmute because it's, there we go. Yeah, there's a lot of background noise here. Okay, so I've been in houses where somebody wanted to get at their floodlights from multiple places in the house. You should have seen the conventional wiring for that. It was crazy. With a keypad or a lighting control system, you can put that all on, all off button everywhere. You could have it on every keypad if you so desired, or on touch panels. So I wanted to kind of throw that out. I like the fact, and we use it all the time, of using the lighting keypads to integrate non-lighting loads. You mentioned shades is a very common one because it kind of is lighting, if you will. But also a room off button is nice, where that bottom button could shut off everything in a room. TV, shades, lights, audio, music, whatever. Just hit one button as you walk out and you don't have to go find the remote. So that's kind of a nice feature. The other thing I would say from a planning point of view is to think about landscape lighting from day one and how that would work. I love an integrated home where the accent lights on the front of the house, like by the garage or front porch, come on at the exact same time as the landscape lights. And they're on the same astronomical clock, as opposed to, them having the popcorn effect where the house mounted lights come on with the lighting control, let's say, and then the transformer on the side of the house might turn the front yard on different than the backyard, depending on the last power outage. We've also provided a button in the garage for maintenance mode where you can turn on all those accent lights and the outside lights during the middle of the day just to check that they're all working. We've even had buttons where we've controlled the color or a scene of outside lights, all integrated in on the same keypad with inside lights. So kind of merge all those together from a planning point of view.
So Jeff, I'll point out to your first point, I have a pool light, and you know where the pool light switch is located? Right out by the pool. So like, I never turn my pool light on because I have to walk outside to do it, versus if I put a retrofit switch in there that talked to my main system, I could set it on a timer. There's some great questions coming into the chat window.
Right. So let me take the one on the power outages, because this one's near and dear to my heart. So what I like to do is set up a critical load panel from day one. This is part of this advanced planning. The critical load panel would obviously have AV and sensitive electronics on it, but that should also include your lighting control processors. It's a little easier to do this with centralized lighting because you've got a single processor, and then you choose whichever lights that you want to be active on your secondary power system, whether that be a generator or whole house battery backup. But it's very important to separate the processor so that when the light flickers, the processor doesn't see that flicker, from floor to flicker and flash. And so there's not like a rebooting going on or anything like that. So I separate that out and count that day one as a critical load and make sure that that stays alive. The other thing I want to point out is that generator power is the dirtiest power. It's worse than FP&L. There's an engine running out there that is sputtering along or whatever, and what it produces is not an even sine wave, 120 volts, 60 hertz. It's not like that. It's all over and that's very, very dirty power. So battery backups, pure sine wave battery backups are the way to go, or whole house UPS for this critical load thing. And that's just a matter of planning. There was a question as far as the dimming. Do you want to talk to that one, Jason? 0 to 10 volt?
Yeah, so that's kind of a trickier question. So human-centric lighting, what type of control is best? So one of the brands we represent, which is Savant Automation, and USAI, which is the lighting fixture company. So USAI, to control their tunable white lights, uses 0 to 10. I'm not familiar with Dolly, but I guess I would have to know more about what you're trying to do, because there's you can have a simple smart bulb do human-centric lighting, which gets controlled differently than a fixture. So there's kind of we kind of have to talk more through that, and if you want to unmute and ask your question more specifically, but it really depends on the fixture we're controlling that is doing the human-centric lighting, or the control system that's running the time clock and the shifting of it.
So 0 to 10 volt. I have a lot of experience with this. There is a different wiring that you need to do. You need to run a low voltage wire to the fixture in addition to high voltage. And that needs to be coordinated. And it's a different motion. It's also a different, from from a electrician point of view, that's an easy miss to make. We've been in houses where the designer or whoever it was, electrician, lighting designer, put in a 0 to 10 volt, and then we don't find out about it until we're going to install the lighting control. It's a different module, and the low volt wire was never run, and now we're in a retrofit situation. And I have seen really good dimming performance with the 0 to 10 volt, 0 to 100 dimming, but it's also one of those things that I would say, if you can avoid it and get the same aesthetic and performance out of something without 0 to 10 volt, avoid it. It's kind of a pain in the butt to deal with, and it's a special case, because if you're reserving space, module counts are usually 4 loads per module. It's not real optimized. If you have one 0 to 10 volt, you've taken up all that space and expense, and you're only controlling one zone. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, DMX is another protocol some companies use, and that's a easier. It still does require that low voltage cable, but you don't have as many limitations. But I would just say we probably need to know more about the project to really tell you which is best. And then Jeff, I don't know if you saw the other question. What's the difference of adding a lighting control system to a remodel project?
Right. That's actually very simple to do. In a case where all the wiring exists and we don't want to change it, so it's conventional wiring, then you just take out the old switch and you put in a new smart switch in the same gang. One of the things that's cool that we now have, it's kind of one of the newer technologies, what they call a hybrid keypad. So if I want a keypad, literally a keypad on the wall, but I also need that gang because there was a switch there controlling a load, they have an all-in-one that is both a load controller and a keypad in one device. So you don't have to widen your 2-gang to a 3-gang to add a keypad. You just reuse that one spot for both purposes. We actually did this just yesterday at a client's house, and now he's got the functionality of a keypad, and we didn't cut any holes or anything. We were in and out in a half hour with that. So I would absolutely throw that into the very easy to do category. One other thing I'll talk about is occupancy sensors. You touched on that. I love occupancy sensors, say in a closet or a pantry, but we typically, as a matter of course, integrate lighting control with the alarm system because there's contacts on everything. The most typical and most useful one is the garage door, the motorized garage door. When you open up that garage door from the visor in your car or what have you, it's really nice that all of the lights in the garage come on, the overhead lights, not just the one on the motor, and the floodlights lighting up the driveway. So when you're driving into that garage, everything's well lit. There isn't anybody lurking there, or you're not going to, drive over something. But might as well use all the lights that you have available. And then the same thing in reverse when you come out to get something from, let's say, a refrigerator that's in the garage. Have that door between the house and the garage, the contact on that trigger the turning on those lights as well. It's very, very useful. Typically your hands are full. You don't have to turn the light on or off because we can make it time out after 10 or 15 minutes. Same discussion goes to exhaust fans in bathrooms. Hey, why not just have it so that when you turn the exhaust fan on in 15 minutes, it turns itself off automatically so that you can get that moist air out of there, but not forget the fan on and have it running when you come home. So these are kind of lightweight automation things that are just standard stuff that any lighting professional would integrate with the system without being asked. And they provide a lot of very useful functionality. It's amazing how many people will contact me years down the road and say, hey, that light didn't go on in the garage, something's wrong, so the sensor went bad or whatever. But they rely on it so much that's the first thing that they notice. It'd be like the light turning on in your car when you open the door. Of course, that's natural. You don't even think about it anymore. That's lighting automation. Any other questions here from the group? We've got a few more minutes before we hit 12. Please go ahead, unmute yourself or go into the chat session. While we're talking about landscape lighting isn't just for gardening, right? It can also be in the covered patio ceiling and have that coming on and off with the lighting control, but match the same color intensity as the rest of the landscape lights. We've done a lot of those retrofits recently where it's literally a hi-hat, but it's outdoor rated. Whether you have that in a pergola or a covered patio, it's outdoor lighting. It can be made by the same company that does the typical landscape lighting, so it's all the same color temperature, blends in well. Pool lights fall into that same category. Kind of want all that color coordinated, or at least timing coordinated, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think on the outdoor technology one that we did a few weeks ago, we had a slide that showed pool lights on. There was like different color lights shining up into the palm trees. There was different color lights off into the distance. So again, with lighting control, you can do all those things.
Right, and you can imagine on one or two specialty scenes that you have an automated sequence. With landscape lighting, I like to go from regular landscape lighting mode from dusk to say 2 a.m. and at 2 a.m. I go into security mode so my cameras see better. Go to more a whiter light, a cooler light like 5,000 Kelvin. Shut off the ones that are shining on the house for just for the aesthetic, and really look at what makes the cameras look best. And so you could do something like that where it's automated, where you have two scenes, and then maybe you have a party scene, the one button where you go out there and things are a little bit different because you're going to be outside and entertaining.
That's interesting. I never thought about a scene to put it into a security mode. So I've never heard of that. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think, oh, well, my cameras see at night. No, landscape lighting is the most important. You want the light all the way at the end point. You don't want like a floodlight or an infrared illuminator. It shines like a flashlight and you only see a little spot. You really want good lighting, and if you have good landscape lighting, it's definitely the best way to have security cameras see the entire property.
I don't see any other questions. So I'll just say again, everybody that attended is going to receive an email with some links and the information to fill out. And that's the way you earn your CEU credit. So make sure you click on those links. Try to do it within the next 48 hours if possible. I know it's a holiday weekend, so if it's next Monday, that's okay. And you'll get some printed certificates or PDFs from the team at Boca Theater for attending. And thank you guys for having me. Look forward to the one we have coming up in a few weeks.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks everybody chatting in there with the thank yous. Thanks for attending and spending time with us, and we look forward to seeing you in the upcoming Boca Tech Talks every Wednesday at 11 a.m.
All right,
thanks
sounds
everybody.
Good. Thanks.
Take care.